don't trust your first measurements. I think there's a lot to be said about confidence, but when it comes to a big investment, measure twice, cut once.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Chronicles. I'm your host, Jonny and the founder of Catani Capital Group. For the last 2 years, I've been studying alternative assets and now help solve the problem of creating passive cash flow for creators, influencers, and busy professionals by bringing you 5 episodes a week of easy to understand education in the world of passive investing. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Cash Flow Chronicles. I'm your host, Jonny, and I am joined today by Ryan Smith. Ryan is a college student in Utah. After experiencing a steep learning curve in real estate investing, he teamed up with his twin brother, Tyler, to build an app to help entry-level investors search and analyze deals. They've been involved in a number of startups and ultimately have found their passion bringing tools to beginning investors. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I know I'm not the seasoned investor as I would have hoped, but it's fun to be here and share my experience.
Yeah, likewise. It's great to have you. It's always good to get kind of that fresh perspective. Obviously a lot of biased opinions when you get to a certain level, and, the outlook of what's changing economically is very, very different when you're, up in the 7-8 figure asset range, as opposed to, even like you and I just starting out in the industry, right? So it'll be cool to kind of get your perspective on things, but let's kind of start at the beginning. You're obviously new. We were talking offline, but you've been in the industry now, you said 3 years. So kind of touch on how you discovered real estate and kind of what's led you to where you're at now.
Totally. I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. There's this, I guess, trend amongst the young grasshoppers of this passive income play, right? And sometimes it could be a bit saturated or overhyped. So I dropped out of college about 3 years ago to follow this serial entrepreneur and helping him. I was on this team of creating businesses, more on the marketing side. And he was an early business mentor for me. He actually built Bridge Investment Group, which is now a $21 billion firm. And so, hearing his stories of how him and his partner built that fund was incredible. And so that's what originally got me interested in real estate. I thought, wow, if this guy can do it, I could probably do it too. Because even though he's, an amazing mentor, he is just like us. And so, from there, I started to, network and meet a bit more folks in the real estate industry. And I ended up meeting my current real estate mentor. And that's when I started to go from theory to, really try and act on all of the principles and things that I was learning. So we started to tour homes in the Utah area. And it was really interesting as I was, scrolling through Zillow, Redfin, trying to crunch the numbers myself. I was listening to a bunch of podcasts. It's a really steep learning curve. And I was living off of dreams and stories from all these early mentors. But when it actually came down to it, I had no idea how to analyze a deal. And so that's when the idea came. My twin brother's a software engineer. And I told him, man, like, if only there was a way, this is probably illegal, but if we could just scrape Zillow and analyze, basically punch all the algorithms that you're doing for one house into the entire map, like, how cool would that be? And he's like, I could probably do it, but I'm not saying we could probably make a business out of it because I don't know how legal that is. So we just did it for ourselves. And
Right.
For a couple of weeks, we started scraping Zillow, punching in the algorithms, and then it kind of just blossomed from there. And so that's kind of my story. Having experienced that steep learning curve, I thought there was a better way of just finding and analyzing deals. Now, I will say though, you can't automate due diligence. There's a lot of things that you can't automate. Right. And that's part of the process I've, been humbled about. The seasoned real estate investors, they have a process for a reason. It's not this plug and play vending machine that all these software companies, tout themselves as. And so I guess that's part of my story. I'm still in the middle of it, but excited just to keep learning.
I love it. That's awesome. And I love that you kind of saw a need in the industry, right? It's funny you mentioned there are certain aspects of this industry that, like you said, can't be automated, right? Due diligence, we'll kind of get to that. But there are parts of it that can be, that just aren't. You have a lot of old school people who do things their old school way, and it works, right? And they're not going to change it. And that's great. But it's nice when you have that fresh perspective. You're like, I could automate this part, because at least now, before you get into the manual due diligence process, right, touring the property, at least you know that this is a property where the numbers at least pencil. You know what I mean? So you're not just
100%.
You're mitigating all those ones that don't even look good on paper and wasting your time. You're at least being efficient with your time and looking at the ones that are potentially worth investing in.
Exactly.
So are you able to share the software? Are other people able to use it, or is it proprietary and you guys keep it close to the chest still?
No, it's open source. The dream was it's funny. We looked at the numbers and all the statistics, and 24 to 25% of all real estate investment purchases, mainly in the residential space, were done by these large iBuyers, the Zillow Group, Open Door, and they had this. I mean, it's kind of gone from mom and pop investors to, this corporate economy. And, I'm all for capitalism and, getting what you're worth. But the idea was to open it up so that more people, give more folks tools so that they could then do it themselves. Give power to the people. And so if you go to InvestorBot.us, that's our platform right now. We're still working out the details. We're talking to a lot of different business mentors. We're hoping to scale it up, and we're hoping to not use ads. We've seen that a lot of platforms use ads as this, facade to try and, have you make deals through them. And we're not really about that. We would love just to provide a valuable tool for beginning investors, seasoned investors, where they see value in it. So yeah, again, InvestorBot.us.
I love it. And is the goal to keep it free, or eventually kind of, almost like ChatGPT, where there's like a free version and then maybe like a subscription version?
Yeah, we're looking to kind of do a hybrid of both, right? And unless there's ads, you need to have some sort of way to pay for the data and the time. And so we're hoping to make this a low entry tool, to where if you pay a couple bucks a month, you can have access to this tool that will then hopefully, pay out millions through using it. And so again, I left college 3 years ago, and then I came back, and I'm actually part of this tech accelerator out of BYU that is helping us kind of form these companies. And so, we're still in the growing phase. We're still learning. We would love feedback on the tool, but that's the idea. And we have over, I think, 25,000 homes on the map right now, all throughout the US.
Okay, wow.
And so all over Boston, Michigan, parts of Louisiana, Texas, Utah here. Trying to think. We're growing really fast. We've seen a lot of interest, especially from young investors. And so we're just learning to grow and create a really valuable tool that people could use.
And what information can you get, right? Obviously the listing itself, does it strictly come from an investment standpoint? Like, here's the median income of the area. Here's the, some comps, the average rent in the area, like all of the sort of back of napkin things that you would do in your on your underwriting?
For sure. Yeah. So we pull through a couple of different APIs to get reliable data sources straight from the MLS. And so all of these right now are just active listings. Anyone can go on there and see them. But what we do is we find the needle in the haystack. So on the map, it's similar to Zillow, how you have a couple of different filters to where you could filter down by the best cash flow. And then once you get into cash flow, you're okay, how are you calculating this cash flow thing? Well, we go and we grab the purchase price. We also grab rent estimates from a couple of different sources. And then we use that to average out. So when you move the dial to, I want the best cash flow in property in all of Boston, it shows that. Now, there's a couple different challenges we saw with that. Usually, the ones with the rent estimates and the lowest purchase price are distressed properties.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
we then added a filter that was filter by price. So if it's under 200, if it's under 150, you have the ability to kind of like filter through that. So it's been really, really solid. We've seen that we can narrow down the top 5% cash flowing properties in any market within a couple of seconds just by moving the dials.
Wow. That's incredible. I love that. And obviously an extremely useful tool. Would love to see something like that in the multifamily space for sure. You know, it's very similar, right? The only difference is just the unit count,
Yep.
you know, and a few other things, but ultimately pretty similar in that sense. So I love that. Big, huge fan of leveraging software, right? Working smarter, not harder. That's kind of I feel like, and you're probably, I guess, considered Gen Z. I would be a millennial, but that's kind of our MO, right? Is the millennials kind of started that work smarter, not harder. And we're still kind of battling the older generations when it comes to that stuff. But
sure.
this is the stuff that I love to see and love to implement. So we talked about the software. Now kind of talk about personally your goals, what your portfolio looks like, or kind of what it looks like on your end in terms of investing.
Yeah. About a year ago, I made my first investment property purchase. My wife and I live in the basement of a duplex and we rent out the top.
Nice.
And I was working with my second mentor at that time. We were touring a bunch of homes. And, you know, we came across that property and it looked like it worked with the numbers. But once we toured it, then we saw a couple different, you know, other problems and other things that piqued my interest. And so from that, we were just able to make a decision and we bought. And so, yeah, I guess we'd call that house hacking.
That's the house hack special right there.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a pretty old house. I never knew I'd become a plumber along with an investor. But it's a big growing experience.
Awesome. I love it. And are you at least living for free or pretty close?
It's pretty close.
Look like? Okay.
Yeah, we offset the mortgage by about 80%.
Nice.
And so we're paying a lot less than we would paying a rent for a similar sized property. And we're building equity in it. So it's
totally
great.
And you bought at a great time, probably got a killer interest rate. Which I'm sure, you know, it's always so nice, especially being a year removed. So I bought my house, it'll be 4 years ago in March. And it's so awesome. Even a year, I remember a year out being like, holy cow, like I made the right decision. And then 2 years out, you're like, oh, it's, you know, and so because these are big purchases, right? Whether or not you're investing passively, you know, you're buying a straight investment property, you're house hacking, or you're buying your house.
Yep.
It's a big decision and it's a lot of money involved, right? And so it's so nice when time goes by and you realize you're like, okay, we did it right. We nailed it.
No, that's
you know?
true. That's true. It's funny that I've heard this saying, the best time to buy was always last year.
Always.
There's always some challenge today.
Second best time is right now.
Exactly.
Yeah. They say, don't wait to buy real estate and wait. You know, it's a get rich slow scheme. If you do it correctly, you will build wealth and, you know, cash flow and all of those things will come. But it takes a lot of time, and I think that's what's very challenging for my generation, and especially your generation, is how much time it takes, because you see these people in crypto and even the stock market, but especially crypto with your generation, getting rich fast, right? And they extrapolate that across any investment. And when, you have to have a 5 to 10 year time horizon with real estate, it's so hard to wrap your head around that. But then you get 5 years removed and you're like, wow, if I would have bought a house 5 years ago, look where I'd be.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's
true.
I think the challenge for you and I, right, is helping people understand, like, yeah, it's going to take time, but if you don't start now, then you're 5 years, no matter when you start, from like really seeing that phase. So what does the next phase look like for you guys? You've got this, you're building equity, you're house hacking. What's kind of the next phase for your investment portfolio?
I'm honestly still working through that. I would love to just continue to slowly build a portfolio. There's a lot of different factors that affect that. We put in, I didn't come from like a ton of money, and so we put almost everything into this house. And so slowly we'll start building. Ideally, I'd love to have a 5 to 10 unit portfolio. And I know for some people that's really small, but for me right now, that's a pretty lofty goal. I like to set goals that I could feasibly achieve within a realistic time frame. And by the time I achieve that, I'll be a different person that has different goals. And so right now I'm looking to slowly build my portfolio along with building this app to help other people build their portfolio as well. So a lot of my energy is just going into InvestorBot right now, talking to a lot of different real estate investors, finding their problems. A lot of times we live off of conjecture where, oh yeah, I assumed that everybody had this problem because I did. But as I've talked to more investors and more folks trying to start out, there's a lot of different problems that don't persist with, all use cases. And so, yeah, I guess that's where my time and effort is right now.
Yeah, it is very challenging to create something that's like a one size fits all, right? Because this industry has so many variables, no matter which avenue you take, right? Even if you're buying, selling raw land, you know what I mean? So it's hard to make something that can, without going super robust and having to, create some big like subscription base or, an expensive software, it's hard to kind of find that range where it's like, okay, do we want to make the most robust platform out there, or do we just want to make something for beginners?
For sure. No, that's true. And that's a challenge that we've been seeing. If you cater to everyone, you cater to no one. So whose problem is the most poignant for us to tackle? But yeah, it's what type of software have you seen been really valuable for you as you've grown your portfolio, or do you have your processes and systems set already?
Yeah, so the challenge is, like it depends what you're trying to do, right? If you're on the acquisition side of things, then you may be using multiple platforms, right? You may be building a list on Reonomy and then having to skip trace and then get all their information. Mm-hmm. And then you've got to make phone calls, and then you've got to get what information, what financials they have, and then you got to throw it into underwriting, and then you've got to underwrite. Then you've got to find, comps, right? And the comps have to be similar to a certain degree and within a certain radius. And then you've got to find, your economic data, your demographic data, right? The median income. And so there's so many variables that go into, for this instance, is just in multifamily, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many different variables that go into it. It would be awesome if there was one place where you could kind of, like you said, you're kind of scraping the back end of all of these different tools, which ultimately, is frowned upon, depending on whose information you're quote unquote using.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's the challenge is, and I think what pushes a lot of people to stay in their comfort zone, especially in the residential space, is that, you know, comps are, it's a little bit, it's easier. It's easier in the residential space. It's easier
Yep.
to find, you know, to have one house, look at 3 houses within a, you know, 2-block radius that have sold within the last 2 years. You can get all of that right on the MLS, you know.
Yep.
Whereas with multifamily, you don't necessarily have that luxury of it being that accessible in the information.
Yeah.
So that's what can deter people, right? But for someone like me, that's what makes it more exciting because there's less people doing it. Like you said in the beginning, you know, you've got these big, huge institutions that are, you know, buying up these large chunks of residential homes and aren't necessarily worried about the comps and all the things that happen. Whereas when the institutions get involved in multifamily, they're usually buying them already up in and fully stabilized and operated space.
Mm-hmm.
And so that allows people like me to come in and buy 40, 100, 150 unit complexes and do that 5-6 times and then sell that to an institution.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Whereas in the residential space, these institutions come in and they'll just buy 100 homes.
Yeah.
In a market that's appreciating, and it doesn't really matter what the numbers look like in terms of their cash flow and all of that. So there's pros and cons to both sides, and you're obviously seeing what it's like going up against these Zillows and Redfins that are buying these massive chunks of and driving up these prices. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Give us kind of your perspective now on what that's like, and, you know, kind of trying to build a portfolio in that space.
No, that's true. And I will backtrack and say we've gone away from scraping and all of the frowned upon ways of getting data.
Okay.
We're doing it right now. And so it's a legit platform and legit site.
Yeah, because the MLS is, as long as you pay, you can access their API, because the short-term rental portfolio that I invested in last year does the same thing.
Yep. Yeah. There's a lot of very legitimate API pulls that we've been able to find. And so we're happy with where we're at now. It's fun. It's funny looking back, but we're happy. It's funny you talked about the large institutions buying and how they're not as deep into the numbers. One thing that I experience, and I'm sure other people have too, is we don't have 20 chances to get it right. We have to be very confident in the one purchase that will either, you know, help us fly or die over these next 5 years, especially for someone who doesn't have a ton going into the down payment, or like the numbers have to work, every dollar counts. Those, you know, number crunching sessions are really important. And so that's something that I've seen that has been a bit different from these larger institutions, is helping every decision on every property build more confidence in each of those decisions, rather than throwing a big net out and some will fail and some will do great, and overall we're going to net positive. But that's been an important part while we've been building the software, is thinking, okay, for some of these folks, this is a really important decision. How can we build more confidence into it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's like we said earlier, you know, for a lot of people, whether it's your first investment property or, you know, you're buying your house, it's you know, they say it's the biggest purchase, right? For most people. Now, ultimately, if your goal is to be an investor, you know, what I advise people on is don't get attached, especially to the first one. You know what I mean? Because if you get attached and, you know, you're trying to make every single wall look perfect and every single detail, and then all of a sudden you're in love with your home and you can't part ways with it when it makes the most sense to to part ways or, move on to the next one, that's a challenge, right? So if you go into something like, hey, this is my first one of, for you, right? Like ultimately getting to 10, this is my first one of 10, I'm not going to invest every single penny and make this perfect, because ultimately that's not what the market needs.
Yep.
And, that'll obviously allow me to, move on to the next one and not get attached. So that's the biggest thing, is I see a lot of people getting attached, especially in the beginning.
No, that's true. It's interesting for some agents that I've seen, they cater more towards the emotional sale and others more towards the numbers. And with house hacking, it's this interesting play where you are living in it. And, I now have a family that's there. So there does have to be some factor into the decision of, would I be okay living in this for a couple of years as I, try and build enough resources to go on to the next one? Not just do the numbers make sense. And so it is an interesting balance that you have to strike.
Totally. Yeah. And that's subjective, right? Because for some people, and typically if you have a family, right, it's pretty different. But for a lot of people who are just getting started, especially at, a young age, they'll live in a freaking bedroom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And rent out the rest of everything and, house hack the crap out of it, to make things work. And, your first one's not always going to work the best, or maybe it does, right? Maybe you do nail it. But the key is to just learn, figure out what you did right, what you did wrong, and then take that to the next one. And the reason that real estate is so special is because of the leverage that it gives you, right? When you build up that equity, you don't necessarily have to sell that to go get your next one. You can leverage it, especially if there's income involved, right? That income that gets to go on your statement that allows you to be a better borrower, and all of these variables that benefit you to, continue to grow your portfolio, which you really don't get with other assets.
Yep. I love that. And there's not a class that you can take in school to learn all this too. It's learned through cold hard experience, or just listening to folks like you tell people about it. And so it's the
school of hard knocks. Like
it is.
You have to go buy it. You have to go buy your first property to figure out if you did it right or if you did it wrong. And I love when people do it wrong. Well, I love when people do it right, of course, but I love when someone does it wrong and is like, cool, I did it wrong, but I'm going to go do it right on the next one, as opposed to, well, I did it wrong, real estate doesn't work.
100%. Yeah. And, even if you're 100% confident, you're going to buy that and find, there's a couple holes in the bucket. And I think that's where the real estate investors really, the good ones differ from the ones that just get caught up in those social media gimmicks, get rich quick. It's like, no, in order to be an investor, you've got to be able to work hard. You've got to be able to really, grind when it's necessary, and learn from your failures.
You will mess up. Like you will get something wrong, right? And you can do everything right, get into the property, and the plumbing needs to be completely redone. Or, there's right, like there's even stuff where no matter how much you mitigate and do your due diligence, something will go wrong. And so as long as you go into something with an open mind and you're like, hey, whatever comes, I'm going to be able to overcome it. Like you said, right? You never knew you were going to be a plumber. As long as you're open-minded and willing to do that, then you're in the right place.
100%. Love that.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. Well, this has been incredible, Ryan. Obviously appreciate all of your insight, your fresh perspective on kind of the newbie in the space, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing you grow. But we'll go ahead and jump to the final 5. You talked a lot about mentors. So first question, best advice you've gotten from a mentor?
Probably the best advice that I've gotten from a mentor is don't trust your first measurements. I think there's a lot to be said about confidence, But when it comes to a big investment, measure twice, cut once.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, great advice. What is about your career that makes you feel like you're fulfilling your why?
After going through the process of jumping into real estate investing, especially house hacking, I've realized it's such a steep learning curve that I think, one, becoming an investor myself, I'm really excited, and I look forward to the day where I could provide that the financial freedom for my kids, for my future family. But I also love giving that opportunity to others. I found a ton of fulfillment in creating a platform that opens up the experience, the algorithms, the resources for anyone to jump into the space. And I'm excited to continue growing that as well.
Absolutely. I love it. I mean, I'm very biased towards this asset, but I think more people, especially my generation, your generation, need to learn how powerful real estate is, even if it's not, the majority of your portfolio like mine and possibly yours, but at least having a portion of it and understanding why it's important to have real estate in your portfolio.
100%. Yeah.
Favorite non-real estate or investment related book?
I love Traction.
Nice.
It's a book about startups and how to achieve explosive growth for any company, but the principles transfers to any industry, any vertical. And I'd say they transfer very well to real estate investing.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh, this is really embarrassing, but a couple weeks ago, I saw the movie Super Pets. I actually enjoyed it.
Nice.
And there's this one kitten that shoots bombs out of its tail. I would first grow a tail, and second, have the ability to just throw bombs everywhere. That sounds terrible, but
I love it.
It sounded better in my head. But when I said it, that sounds very
original.
violent.
I've never gotten that answer, so I love it. That's great. Cool. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you and learn more?
Feel free to reach out to me via email, ryan@investorbot.us, or you could reach out on Instagram. I think there might be a link in the comment, or at Ryan Smith with 2 H's and 2 underscores.
Cool. Yeah, we'll link that in the show notes. We'll link the InvestorBot.us in there as well. Make it super easy for people to find. Ryan, thanks so much for your time. This was awesome.
Appreciate it, Jonathan. Appreciate your time, and I love being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you again for tuning in. Who do you know that wants more cash flow? Share this episode with them so you can grow your cash flow together. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you're subscribed on your platform of choice so you never miss a new episode. Go to KataniCapitalGroup.com to learn more.